When I was a teenager, I dated a guy a couple of years older than me. We'll call him Nate. He was always exceptionally sweet and would tell me how I deserved the world. We never really broke up. He would just move away and it would be agreed that we wouldn't date anymore. We would always end up connecting back with each other no matter what. Then, when I was 17, he went to jail for stabbing his stepdad. We hadn't seen each other in almost a year at that point. Afterward, he would never talk about it in detail, but he would explain that he saw no choice at the time. His stepdad even went to his court hearings and stated that he wasn't to blame, and that he made the mistake of cornering him in a violent rage. When he got out of jail, he seemed to be a different person. He was much more mature. He got a well-paying job right away. He discovered the love of cooking, and he was clean and organized and well-read. He looked me up the first day he got back to town, and we slowly started developing a friendship and eventually started casually dating. He began staying at my home on weekends, and then after a few months he needed a place to stay for a month and a half between selling his trailer and moving into a nicer rental, and things honestly seemed to be really good. We were talking about maybe moving in together, and he would hint at the idea of proposing. Then one day he started drinking again and became unsettling and weird. Almost immediately after he started drinking, he began lying, and I started to get the big heebie-jeebies. He would say he was leaving for work, but then an hour later his co-worker would come to the door and ask where he was. When I would ask him about it, instead of calmly explaining that he was at his mom's on the way to work or something, he would storm off and ignore my calls for days. I immediately ended the relationship, telling him he could stay at his mom's until his place was move-in ready. A friend of mine came over to my house and helped me neatly pack up all of his stuff, and we dropped it off at his mom's for him. I can't tell you exactly why, but we also decided to put chain locks on the door that Nate had a key to, because even though he had given my key back, I had a completely unfounded suspicion that he had made a copy without telling me. Sure enough, that night Nate came to my door without calling and without knocking and tried to let himself in. I had rested my skateboard against the door, so when it opened I heard the crash. I heard him cuss under his breath and leave. The next day I came home from walking my dog with a male friend, who I had been friends with my entire life and would hang out with the both of us, and there was a picture I had painted for Nate on the front porch of my house. It had blood splattered all over it. I asked my friend what I should do, and he was honestly kind of horrified. It was too big to fit in the garbage can, and I didn't want this blood-covered painting just sitting around my house, so later that night we ended up burning it in the outdoor fireplace. A few days later, Nate called me and asked if he could come over later and talk. I said that was fine, and he told me he would be over about 7 p.m. At 8:30, he hadn't called or shown up, so I was sitting on my computer when I got a call from my aunt who had a police scanner. Nate had broken into a woman's home with a gun, and she had shot her own shotgun at him. The police eventually caught him running in the direction of my house. He went back to jail, but only for about 6 months, since they couldn't find the gun he had, and because the woman whose house he broke into didn't want to cooperate with police, he ended up getting a very light charge. Around this time I had started dating someone else. We'll call him Sam, and the very first time we were out around town together, Nate saw us and came over and ripped his shirt off, challenging Sam to a fight. Sam responded just by kind of chuckling in discomfort, and we got back into the car and left. This became a semi-regular occurrence, and then one night we were cuddled up in my living room watching TV, and we heard something hit the patio window really loudly. We went and looked around expecting there to be a bird or something, but we couldn't find anything. The next day after Sam had left, I went outside onto the small patio, and in the light of day I could see what we had missed the night before. It was a bullet for a hunting rifle. It looked like it had been thrown at the window from over the fence. I ended up moving away and marrying Sam. Nate actually randomly showed up once when we were meeting up with an all-around mutual friend, and it was pretty weird, but it was pretty coincidental, so we shrugged it off. A little while later, Nate went back to jail for breaking into another woman's house. He was released after a certain amount of time after that as well. Then, almost immediately after his release, he was all over the national news because he had been caught trying to kidnap multiple children, going so far as to take one child and choke them until the father by coincidence found them and was able to pull him off of him. The boy survived, but he was unconscious for a while. He suffered no brain damage but was pretty shaken and likely will be for life. After Nate was incarcerated for that, he was arrested right after his release for the murder of a woman in the town we had grown up in several years earlier because they had only discovered her remains whilst he was in jail. Details were never publicly released because the trial is still ongoing, but the rumor is that he broke into her house, having been casual acquaintances with her, and killed her, and then moved her body to a small forested area on a mutual friend's parents' house. He also allegedly killed his cellmate while he was in jail, but he was found not guilty because the jail mishandled a bunch of the evidence, and the prison guards mixed up their stories a bit, so the case couldn't prove he did it beyond a reasonable doubt. His cellmate was just a poor young kid, barely 19, in jail for theft. Of course, the kid should have gone to jail, but in no way should that have been a death sentence. While he's been in jail, he has apparently attacked multiple female prison guards by choking them. There are, of course, rumors around town that some other missing people were also his doing, and there are a bunch more true stories about women catching him trying to break into their house that never made it to court because they didn't know who it was at the time, so police had no one to look into, and they only realized it was Nate when his face became plastered all over the media. I often think of the fact that I intimately knew this person, and sometimes I feel guilty for not having seen the signs. Other times I feel creeped out that I could have been a victim of his. I feel like I somehow should have known that I was living with a potential serial killer, but until he started drinking, he truly seemed like a stand-up guy that had made bad decisions and was doing his best to make a decent life for himself. Up until very recently, I never spoke about him, or even acknowledged I knew him. Obviously, my husband knows, but he knows it makes me uncomfortable and we don't discuss it. I guess I just wanted to share this creepy encounter story here as a way to process it.
And that concludes another episode of Creepy Limes, where we delve into the unsettling and inexplicable encounters that send shivers down your spine. If you enjoyed these chilling tales, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more unnerving stories. Before we part ways, we want to hear from you. Have you had a creepy encounter you'd like to share? Drop it in the comments below, and who knows, it might be featured in our next video. Your stories make this community truly spine-tingling. Remember, the world is full of inexplicable moments that can send a shiver down your spine, and we're here to explore them together. Stay curious, stay vigilant, and most importantly, stay safe out there.